I just felt completely out of my element for that scene.
Thing I know, like I get these massive pains, like just shooting up into my ear, and I'm like, it's just anxiety. It's like, at one point I had heart palpitations. I'm like, okay, thing that I go through, whether it's pains but I think that's just part of playing this role. And
hey, what are these words? Like, these are holy, holy words said by the holiest being that ever walked the face of the earth.
All of their scriptural beliefs or understanding from our shows, that would be an issue with us. And if they see that the show is starting to get successful, they can pour more into it, like what these media companies tend to do. And in order for our show to be free.
They didn't expect it. Not from Hollywood. Not like this. Just weeks ago, Jonathan Roumie, the man known to millions as the face of Jesus in The Chosen, stood at the center of a movement that was rewriting the rules of modern entertainment. Alongside a small, deeply faithful team of producers, writers, and creatives, led by Dallas Jenkins, Roumie helped bring to life a project that Hollywood quietly dismissed until it couldn't be ignored. The Chosen wasn't just a show, it became a phenomenon, a crowdfunded series that bypassed studio control, a global mission dressed as a media project, a light in an industry more comfortable with shadows. Roumie, Jenkins, and their team weren't interested in controversy. They didn't pick fights. They simply told stories of grace, redemption, sacrifice. And that's exactly what made them dangerous. Because while millions were streaming, weeping, and sharing their testimonies, others were watching too. Not to be inspired, but to be alarmed. On July 24th, 2025, the first warning signs surfaced. Industry reports, quiet headlines, a strange legal inquiry involving licensing rights and behind-the-scenes distribution partners. But then came more: sudden contract terminations, event cancellations, and whispers of unprofessional conduct that no one could quite explain. At first it seemed like coincidence, but the pattern was too clear. Jonathan Roumie and the team behind The Chosen were being legally targeted, not for what they did wrong, but for what they stood for: faith, truth, conviction. And in a system built to reward compliance, that kind of faith isn't welcomed. It's warned. This wasn't just about one man. It was about every soul behind the scenes who chose to make Christian art that couldn't be ignored. And as one anonymous executive told an outlet under condition of secrecy, they didn't break a law, they broke the industry's comfort zone. Now the backlash had begun, swift, silent, and terrifying. Long before the lights, long before the cameras. Jonathan Roumie was just another struggling actor in Los Angeles. He drove Uber, worked freelance voiceover gigs, took background roles in shows where no one knew his name. He had talent, he had training, but what he didn't have was momentum. By 2018, his savings were nearly gone, his rent was overdue, and the dream he carried since childhood felt further away than ever. So he did something few in Hollywood dare to do. He surrendered, not to failure, but to God. He laid face down on his apartment floor and prayed, not for fame, not for a role, but for clarity, for provision, for purpose. And days later, the phone rang. It was Dallas Jenkins. A small-scale project was forming, a short film, a portrayal of Jesus. Nothing fancy, nothing high budget, just a vision. Roumie accepted, without knowing that one decision would ignite a global revival. As The Chosen grew, so did Roumie's impact. His portrayal of Christ wasn't loud, it was human, full of warmth, vulnerability, and compassion. He didn't just act the part, he carried it with reverence. Off-screen, he stayed grounded, spoke openly about his faith, prayed before filming, led spiritual reflections with cast and crew. He became more than an actor, he became a vessel. But in Hollywood, where image is everything and silence is currency, Roumie's boldness stood out, and not everyone welcomed it. Behind the praise were producers who felt uncomfortable, executives who saw his prayer life as a risk, influencers who mocked the show's message. And while The Chosen became a cultural moment, Roumie became something else, a target. Because portraying Jesus with truth is one thing, but living like him, openly, in a place that resents his name, that's something Hollywood never quite forgives. It began as an experiment. The Chosen was never meant to rival streaming giants or dominate global charts. It started as a humble idea. What if we told the story of Jesus, not as a distant figure of divinity, but through the eyes of those who followed him? Flawed people, human people, people like us. Dallas Jenkins, the show's creator, had just faced the biggest failure of his career. His last film project had collapsed. Studios were no longer calling. He was done, until a simple short film about the birth of Christ, made in his church's backyard, went viral. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within months, the crowdfunding campaign for a full series shattered records. Millions of dollars poured in. Not from Hollywood, but from believers, ordinary people who had waited years for Christian media that didn't feel fake or watered down. And then The Chosen premiered. It didn't look like church TV. It didn't preach. It breathed. It let moments breathe. It showed Jesus laughing, crying, washing feet, holding hands, meeting people in their pain instead of preaching down to them. Audiences were stunned. Not just believers, skeptics too. In a world drowning in agendas, The Chosen did something radical. It honored the gospel without shame. And it worked. By season 2, the show had over 100 million global views, translations in dozens of languages, billboards in Times Square, cast screenings at the Vatican. Even mainstream critics had to admit, something real was happening here. But behind the applause, not everyone was celebrating. Streaming services turned down distribution deals. Journalists wrote hit pieces, accusing the show of pushing faith narratives. Some critics went as far as calling it dangerous for being too Christian. And soon, doors started closing. Quietly, strategically, intentionally. Because The Chosen wasn't just telling Bible stories, it was proving something Hollywood had worked hard to bury. That faith still moves people. It didn't start with protests. It started with phone calls, subtle ones, behind closed doors, executives expressing concern over the show's growing influence, agencies hinting that talent aligned with The Chosen might struggle booking future roles, emails quietly pulling partnerships, event invitations revoked without explanation. At first, the team brushed it off. Politics, competition, maybe just the unpredictable tides of the industry. But then came the patterns. One of the show's key producers was removed from a panel at a major film festival, days before speaking on faith in media. A social media platform temporarily banned official promotional content from The Chosen, citing violation of terms with no clear reason. And certain advertisers began withdrawing interest, claiming discomfort with the show's polarizing messaging. The attacks weren't overt. They were systemic and deliberate. It became clear this wasn't backlash from viewers. This was Hollywood itself pushing back. Not because the show was bad, but because it was working. Because it proved that Christians, long ignored in the entertainment world, were not only hungry for content, they were showing up, funding it, spreading it. And worst of all for some, it wasn't angry or political. It was beautiful. Jonathan Roumie with his quiet reverence. Dallas Jenkins with his unapologetic commitment to truth. The crew, many of whom started the show unpaid, treating every shoot like a sacred assignment. It challenged everything Hollywood believed about faith. It exposed the spiritual void in an industry built on spectacle. And that kind of challenge demands a response. So the knives came out, not with noise, but with contracts, regulations, legal threats. And slowly, the Chosen team realized they weren't just telling a story about Jesus. They were living out a chapter of it. By early 2025, the pressure wasn't just cultural, it was legal. A dispute emerged over intellectual property rights. One of the international distributors claimed partial ownership over the series, demanding creative control over how episodes were released and marketed overseas. But the timing raised eyebrows. These same partners had remained silent for years, until The Chosen crossed the 500 million view mark. Jonathan Roumie and Dallas Jenkins were stunned. The lawsuits weren't about violations, they were about leverage. Leverage to slow down the movement, leverage to pull it under institutional control. Insiders reported that if the team had agreed to dilute its messaging, certain cases would quietly disappear. But they didn't. Instead, they fought back. The legal battle became a spiritual one. Roumie, normally reserved, made a rare public statement. When you choose to tell the truth about Christ, you will face the cross one way or another. We expected this. Meanwhile, Christian communities rallied around the team. Churches held prayer vigils. Fans launched donation campaigns to cover legal fees. And social media exploded with the hashtag number #IStandWithTheChosen. But even that sparked retaliation. Mainstream platforms began throttling the show's visibility. Algorithm changes buried their trailers. Collaborations were canceled last minute. Even faith-based influencers were warned not to take sides. And yet the team pressed forward, because The Chosen wasn't just a show anymore. It was a movement. A movement that exposed what Hollywood fears most, that you don't need big studios, celebrities, or compromise to change the world. You need faith. And when that faith refuses to bow, the system fights harder to break it. But something strange was happening. The more resistance they faced, the faster the audience grew. Despite the lawsuits, the blacklisting, the shadow bans, and the industry backlash, The Chosen didn't disappear. It multiplied. In countries where it wasn't even officially released, fans translated the episodes themselves, subtitles appearing in over 70 languages within weeks. In places where churches had been forced underground, the show spread through encrypted drives and flash disks. People were watching because something deeper than entertainment was being shared. Jonathan Roumie, Dallas Jenkins, and their team could have stepped back. They could have softened the message, scaled down production, or let others take control. But they didn't. Instead, they doubled down. Season after season, they kept telling the story. Not the sanitized version, but the truth. Jesus, misunderstood, rejected, persecuted, yet always walking forward. Roumie embodied that off-screen as much as on. In interviews, he refused to water down his faith. He continued praying before shoots. He continued preaching, gently, with love, on platforms that barely tolerated his presence. The backlash only confirmed something they had always known. Telling the truth comes with a cost. But silence? Silence would cost more. Because for every canceled contract, a new viewer clicked play. For every critic, there were testimonies of marriages healed, addictions broken, hearts turned toward God. The show became more than episodes. It became an altar, one that reminded millions. Faith isn't supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be real. So now, as the world watches The Chosen press forward against legal battles, media resistance, and spiritual warfare, the question isn't just what happens next. The question is, what are we willing to risk for truth? If you believe stories like The Chosen deserve to exist, like this video, subscribe for more faith-based deep dives, and share this with someone who's been told faith no longer belongs in the spotlight. Because this story isn't over, it's only just beginning.